Hi, my name is Michaela Torkington, and I'm one of the co-founding directors of an organisation called Flourish Together. We're a social enterprise that's based in and around Greater Manchester, and we work across the northwest and other parts of the country as well. We have a network of over 500 to 700 social entrepreneurs in any given year who engage with our programmes, support, peer learning events, mentoring programmes. And I met Kat a couple of years ago when she came to one of our conferences, Local to Global Women Changemakers Conference. And we've been friends and colleagues ever since, and have been since working together on a few things. It's been great to see her come up with this idea for a virtual skills share and a virtual summit, and I'm more than happy to try and give you the benefit of some of my experience, which is around supporting social entrepreneurs. And I've been helping charity social enterprises, social ventures, community projects do their thing for nearly 20 years now. And it struck me that one of the topics that we should be covering right now is around people's income generation strategies. So I've called this session, How Does Your Income Generation Cocktail Stack Up? Because it's something people sometimes forget about, or they focus all on one type of income and not another. So that's what I'm going to be running through over the next 20 minutes or so. So how does yours stack up? What I'm asking people to have a look at through this session are the different types of income generation that are out there. And with social enterprises in particular, they're a little bit different to your traditional private sector businesses. If you can imagine that, I'll just skip forward there, but in the private sector, it's usually just trading, commissioning, and a mixture of social finance and investment. But in, I'm going to come back to those, in our charity, voluntary and community sector, and with social enterprises in that mix, you've got a much more diverse cocktail of income generation at your fingertips, should you choose to use it. So trading, I'm going to talk through just briefly. Commissioning, we're going to look at funding and fundraising, and what are the differences between those, and social finance and investment. What I would say with anybody who's taking the time to reflect on this is thinking about what your short-term and long-term priorities are. It might be that it's all right to do one thing or a couple of things for now, but what do you need to be doing long-term? And in order to engage more fully or raise more income through these different boxes, through these different areas, who might your key partners, stakeholders and customers need to be to do that? So in terms of commissioning, I thought I'd start with commissioning is different to trading. So let's take a step forward. Trading is obviously selling products and services, and that could be, I've got a range of them here from social enterprises. So we've got Cowherd's Juices in Salford. She's obviously selling a juice drink there. She's also selling health and wellbeing lifestyles, and finding ways to commission health and wellbeing support and activities. But the primary product is the juice. Next along, you've got Hume Community Garden Centre. It's a social enterprise garden centre in the middle of Manchester, and they're selling trees, plants, bulbs, you name it, anything for the garden. So that's one form of trading to the public, but they're also selling events, so ticketed events, and they're also selling and hiring out space. So people can rent a room, hire part of the garden centre and run events there. They've run everything from away days to weddings to workshops and networking events. Next along, you've got one of the Clink restaurants, the Clink Cafe in Manchester there. So they're selling all manner of things in addition to contracted to run back to work programs and training and development for ex-offenders, but they're also selling sandwiches, drinks, tea, coffee, crisps and everything else, as well as hiring their space and other things. Down the bottom here, you've got Too Good to Go, just highlighting, people are trading apps and subscriptions. That's a product that helps people buy food that's close to going out of date. So a lot of the restaurants, takeaways, shops that are selling food can sell it at a cheaper rate so that it gets bought and doesn't get wasted and go into landfill. There's a picture of me there, just to highlight that people, individuals, are selling themselves and their services. So I'm obviously selling services in training and consultancy. We have people who buy my time for business planning, business development work, coaching, delivering enterprise support programs, doing social value measurement. So there's all sorts of services people buy from me individually, as well as our collective team at Flourish who do that. Another type of individual selling is our lovely Vic Turnbull there. So Vic helps produce our podcasts. She's selling training and development in podcast production and design, and she's selling consultancy services to help edit and produce those for people. Last but not least, I've included an organisation called Me Again there, and whilst a big part of their business is around commissioning, because they're supporting people with cancer to live well and to feel beautiful and to feel part of society and to feel me again, as the name suggests, feel like themselves again, as well as the commissions and the contracts from cancer care commissioning services. They're selling wigs and health and wellbeing services and holistic therapies to the public. So there's always, it's through those case studies I've hopefully started to demonstrate some examples of this mixed model of income, where trading is also an element of that. And I highlight the Buy Social logo down the bottom there because some of you may know Social Enterprise UK are one of the main national agencies that support social enterprise in terms of policy and awareness raising and linking into government, and they have this Buy Social directory. And so whether you're looking to buy from social enterprises or you'd like to see more impact from your purchasing power, or whether you'd like to see other examples of these, or maybe you work out who your competitors are, the Buy Social directory is there, and you can apply to be part of that directory as well if you're a social enterprise. So that's trading. That was the first green box there, trading a social enterprise. Commissioning, I wanted to start with, but I think it makes better sense to talk about trading because more people understand what that is, selling products and services. Commissioning is a bit more kind of wholesale and a bit more in bulk, and it's meeting the objectives of a commissioner, so a budget holder of some kind. That could be a budget holder in the health sector, it could be a budget holder in the education sector, in your local authorities. It can be a budget holder in the private sector, budget holder in the voluntary community sector. I commission people to do work for me. Granted, it's not at the hundreds of thousands of pounds scale that perhaps the local authorities or others are, but there's lots of routes to commissioning. It doesn't have to be, in the realms of procurement and massive tenders for work. It can be commissioned project and commissioned services. So in terms of thinking about commissioning, I'm suggesting that if you're going to go for this, you need to understand that commissioner's needs and priorities, and what scale of income are you looking to bring in, and who do you have to network with, and who do you have to talk to in order to get that. So if you're looking for consultancy services or day rates or programs or activities, you're probably talking on smaller amounts of money, often under sort of the 50k or 100k or whatever. Different commissioners will have different thresholds as to which they have to put their commissions out in a more transparent way to tender. And so there are smaller commissions for things like research, for things like consultancy, for things like certain programs and projects, where you can create an individual relationship with people and they'll commission you to do the work. There's also, specific commissioners across those sectors that I've mentioned. So, you know, health commissioners across public health, across social care, across young people services, commissioners from the local authorities across all their departments, you know, commissioners of education. There's all sorts of people buying things, be they services, environmental services, waste services, training and development. So it's all about researching and relationship building with whoever's got the power, the influence, the budget and the need for what you're doing. You know, it's worth considering what's the process involved, and have you got the capacity? Are you at the right scale and the right space to engage with that type of commissioning process? Whether it's light touch and it's just filling in a form, whether it's part of a competitive process, whether you've got to go onto a kind of procurement portal for a larger tender, having a think about what's involved, having a think about whether or not you have to match any money in order to deliver it, what the timescales of these things are, what levels of insurance and track record, policies and procedures you need to have in place to go for that. So it's a bit more involved, as you can hear, than just trading to your man or your woman or your customer on the street. But it's not to be dismissed, because small organisations can go for commissions, either at small scale, as part of consortium, as part of groups, of collective groups. If you feel you're not ready just yet to go for commissions or into procurement practices, then you can work with bigger organisations who are, and build your track record and build your income that way. As I've said, thinking about the capacity and that you've got and what you need to report on. Usually when you're going for commissioning opportunities, you don't storm in with what you do, how you do it, and what you have to offer. You really have to listen to what the commissioner needs, what their objectives are. They will have a budget to spend, and it's to deliver certain outcomes, and it's to meet strategic priorities, often research priorities that may or may not have been fed down through government, through certain policies, and they're trying to tackle social inequalities, they're trying to tackle welfare needs, education needs, environmental needs, and so you really have to understand how your products and services align with those strategic needs, and to offer a solution up. And basically you're trying to save that commissioner's time, money and energy with the solution that you present. If your immediate products and services meet that without any tweaks, brilliant, but you might find that you have to slightly repackage things, do things in a slightly different way, or certainly at a different scale potentially, depending on the size of commission that you're going for. It's very important, if you're putting in tenders or proposals for commissioning, that you really cost these things out appropriately and accurately. Often when people write grants, there can be a bit of a finger in the air, a bit of a hope for the best, hammer out the bid, hammer out the funding application and hope for the best. It's quite a different approach, I would say. It's a similar information and it's a similar set of questions, but you can't really take any guesswork at these. You have to cost them out appropriately and make sure that there's a full cost recovery there, because they'll only, once you put your bid in, there's no wriggle room, and you need to make sure that you've planned for this thing appropriately. And whilst commissioning contracts are often not there to be seen to be making you huge profits, there are ways to create profit margins in these things. They may not fund certain costs attached to your business. They'll assume that your overheads are already covered, so they won't be wanting to cover your core costs alongside delivering their project, usually, or alongside delivering their commission. But there's ways of creating bandwidth and wriggle room through the way you design your budgets to enable that to at least be possible. Thinking about where you can make cost savings if you get the bid once that comes through. You've got to think about how you're going to govern yourself, and if you've got relevant legal structure and credible governance for them to want to invest in you. And you've got to be reputable with the right partners, and have a values fit, just not go for commissioning opportunities because they're there or because they look like a juicy extra bit of money. I'd really say you're entering into a partnership really when you're delivering a piece of commissioning work, and your values and your priorities need to align with that commissioning body, organisation or person. So we're given some examples here of where you can look for commissioning opportunities. I would say you can look for them anywhere. You can look for them with individuals across the sectors that I've mentioned, but these particular portals, the CHEST, various government, the Government Contracts Finder, Arts Council, there's a couple of other examples there. They all have online portals for you to go and see what opportunities are coming up, what are out, and it'll tell you what the ask is, how long you've got to write your proposal and get it in, and what the process is. So that's my whistle-stop tour to commissioning. We talked about trading, so it just brings us back. I just sort of recap here. We've talked about trading and commissioning, and those are standard types of income generation that are there whether you're social enterprise or not, whether you're private business or not. But once you start to be running a not-for-profit organisation, not-for-private profit organisation, profit for purpose, however you want to phrase it, there starts to become other opportunities about for you to develop what you're doing. There has been a culture, and it's an ongoing culture where organisations being grant dependent or fundraising dependent exist. Charities in particular can sometimes sit in that bracket, but in the current climate, in today's world, is relying on funding to keep you going is never going to be the answer, because it's just too hard. Usually any organisation's got some great products and services it could be selling to other audiences, if it has the time to imagine who they might be and make them relationships. But I'm quickly going to have a look through what funding and fundraising are, what they're for, and when to use them, and then we'll finalise on social finance. So fundraising, I talk about funding and fundraising differently. Funding is the grant side of things that I'll come on to in a second. Fundraising is the kind of more unrestricted. So whereas grants, you have to fill in a form, there's criteria, there are deadlines, there are hoops to jump through, reporting to be done, budgets to be crafted to fit within their grant application criteria. With fundraising, it's up to you. It's up to your level of creativity, the level of your networks, and how convincing you can be to draw in this kind of resource. And I say resource because it's not necessarily direct income. Sometimes this stuff is pro bono, it's in kind, it's donations, predominantly that's the form of income that these things take. But there's some examples that I highlight here for you to consider. So crowdfunding, is that relevant for your business? Is that relevant for the way you want to operate? Is it something you could use to pilot something, to raise awareness or shout out and make a campaign about something? Can it help you get the doors open on something that you otherwise wouldn't be able to? Lots of different kinds of businesses, social enterprises, charities and private businesses use crowdfunding as a tool and a way to draw in resources that would take longer to find elsewhere, and often it's from their community of interest. So whether if you're going to crowdfund, you've got to have a crowd to go to. You can't just crowdfund from a standing start, otherwise you fail. And there are some foolproof methods for crowdfunding, and one of them is making sure that you've got a foolproof plan. There's over a 6 to 8 week period, you've really worked out week to week how you're going to run this thing, and you've mobilised a number of champions in your communities to help you with this, and 20%, if not 30%, of the total figure that you're looking to raise should have been raised within about the first week, so that you can show that snowball effect and encourage and entice others to back it. So you get your early adopters getting that money in first, so that you can then leverage in the rest off of the back of that initial 20 to 30% early on. I could run another workshop on crowdfunding. I've run 4 successful crowdfunding campaigns, and I've helped about 11 or 12 people now secure over £150,000 through crowdfunding. So, you know, you can do it on a small scale, you can do it on a large scale. You can do it, you know, once and, you know, never again, or we might use it as a tool, you know, over a number of years to get resources in. So corporate social responsibility and sponsorship initiatives, that's really, you know, I don't really like it, but that's going with your begging bowl to the corporate world. And it isn't going with your begging bowl. Kat would tell me off for that. You know, you're entering into a relationship with them, and so I wouldn't go for cash alone for these sorts of things. It may be that you can convince them to sponsor something, or put some cash behind something in return for advertising, or in return for promotion and other things. But I'd be a little bit more creative than that, and build relationships with them. Help them know what it is you need. It's much easier to go and talk to businesses and corporates about your needs and how you're impacting the community. And, you know, some of the things you're struggling with, so it might be that you need mentoring support, it might be that you need some marketing help, it might be that you need storage space. There's all sorts of other ways to get income and resources in without necessarily going with a begging bowl. So like sponsorship and CSR. Again, partnerships with local businesses is a similar sort of thing, but they might have slightly more of an insight into what you're doing. They might have more of an awareness of the community that you're in and who you're working with. It may or may not be an easier sell, you know, in terms of requesting support, requesting backing, but it's key to make those relationships for you know, for fundraising and for other purposes. Some organisations fundraise through membership models. Lots of organisations do this. Some of them do it kind of automatically through online subscriptions. Some of them do it through other means. But it's just worth thinking if your audience and your market would buy into a membership model, and not forgetting the amount of admin time it takes to administrate these things. You know, Flourish, for example, we don't run a membership model. I wanted to make sure that we were accessible to all, and that I haven't got the time to administrate you know, membership fees every year. But plenty of other organisations operate on that model. We raise our resources through other means, through crowdfunding, for example. We run an annual crowdfunding campaign, and we have done you know, a number of times. We charge tickets for events and things like that, and we generate our income through a mixture of grants, contracts, and paid work and consultancy. But we've dabbled and used each of these methods at one time or another. E-fundraising and social media, so that really ties in with crowdfunding, but often you can build relationships, reach out to new backers, new potential supporters of your work and champions. It might be that, you know, you need social media champions and social media supporters to promote what you're doing, which then helps you draw in wider fundraising options from those social media channels. Facebook and all sorts of other platforms now have fundraising channels within them, so it's worth having a look at those. There's also community shares and social impact bonds, and they are another way of raising resource. So you've got ways in communities of reaching out and seeing if they will invest in what you're doing through a community share offer. So that's, people have done that for all sorts of things, saving community pubs, setting up new services, even setting up sort of hydroelectric power stations. There's all sorts of examples where people have set up community share issues. Often in rural areas as well, they've used community share issues. It's basically, it's people in that community will buy a share. It might be £1, £5, £100, and they will buy a number of shares. It's a bit like crowdfunding, but there's more administration involved. The community of interest tends to have a vested interest in wanting to back that thing, whatever it might be, and they're usually expecting some sort of dividend. So a community share issue will normally create a financial return, either in a nominal way or a significant way for people buying those shares. And there's ways of building in not paying out a dividend in the first number of years that people put their money in, so that you've got time to build up the model, get the doors open, do whatever it is you said you were going to do to create that profit, to then start to pay people back either their shares or the dividends should they need to do that. Social impact bonds are different again, and they're all about investing in social value. So you project the social impact and the value that you're going to create, and create a bond around that, so a contract almost around that, and commissioners and other investors will put into the social impact bond on almost a kind of payment by results method for creating social value. And ticketed events are what they say. So you can probably think of other examples, but that's just a whistle-stop tour of fundraising. Where to go for support? So I'm just going to flip back. So fundraising, is the unrestricted. Grants, I'm not going to go through in a huge detail here because there's so many different options and there's so many different criteria, and I will touch on what makes successful applications and things, but here I'm just wanting to help you consider where to go for support. So whether it's fundraising support, whether it's social enterprise development support, whether it's grants and access to investment, there's lots of opportunities. There's heaps of it out there if you know where to look and if you've got the time and the hours in the day. I would always say, spending your time trading with customers who can be repeat customers is a far better use of your time in many ways than seeking grants and that sort of thing, because they tend to be a one-off investment. But invariably, charities and social enterprises need to go for grants, either because it's the beneficiaries that they're trying to help can't afford to be their customers, so they have to find ways to offset it, and so that grant provider or the commissioner, or they sort of pay it forward, whatever trading business model you have to create surplus, covers the costs to be able to subsidise the service and the products and the accessibility of what you're doing for those people who need it most. So looking for cash and resources, there are what I would say is local, regional, national and sort of sectoral ways to find this stuff, this support, this finance. Leave no stone unturned, and just because your face might not fit in one camp doesn't mean it won't fit in another. Be that your face, your project, your idea, the way you work, there's it's horses for courses, and it's ways of finding and navigating your way through to what the best forms of finance and support are for you. So locally, you've got councils for voluntary services, different enterprise hubs and business support providers, growth hubs, and these sorts of things. There'll be various local forums. Historically, although that may change over time, universities and housing associations have been big anchor organisations that invest in voluntary community and social enterprise activities and are low-hanging fruit commissioners of new ideas, be they for research, innovation or social justice and community development purposes. You've got art networks and other local public sector agencies that can help you navigate and link to what support and cash is available where you are. There are then a range of regional providers. I've not put them all there, but there's an agency called Key Fund that works predominantly across the north. The School for Social Entrepreneurs have regional posts, regional sort of offices, and it varies from county to county and area to area, but often on a geographical patch there'll be a regional social enterprise support network of some sort. So for example, you've got Social Enterprise Network in Liverpool, you've got Social Enterprise Cumbria, you've got CellNet, Social Enterprise Network for Lancashire, Social Enterprise London, you've got Social Enterprise Yorkshire and Humber, you've got Social Enterprise West Midlands. So it varies depending on where you are, but there's this regional support networks in some areas. Nationally, then you've got another raft of all sorts. Social Enterprise UK, I've already mentioned, the kind of national sort of lobbying policy agency support and try and develop the social enterprise sector. The National Council for Voluntary Organisations work more on the charity and voluntary side. Agencies like Unlimited that will support both start-up and scale-up social entrepreneurs through cash and support. Big Society Capital, like a much larger sort of investment agency that invests in other support and investment projects. All sorts of lottery funds, it's worth having a look up, anything from Awards for All through to individual thematic projects that the lottery will support, and their sort of long-standing Reaching Communities fund. Arts Council, Social Investment Business again have grant loan mix support. Clearly so, they are more on the equity investment side. So I'll do a quick backtrack shortly, but some of these larger agencies are starting to get more into the world of social investment, which I'll touch on in a second. Charity Bank, Paul Hamlin, I mean, there's a bunch there. And then alongside that, you've also got different funds and support per sector. So don't see yourself as a silo, don't see yourself as something in a box or in an area. You're working across sectors, you're working across geographies sometimes. There's different ways that this is a different kind of cocktail. Getting your local, regional, national, sectoral cocktail of funds and investments looked at and considered is another sort of facet to that. Before I move on, I'm just going to quickly jump back to this slide. So we've talked about trading, commissioning, funding and fundraising, social finance and investment. I just want to help you be clear on this is more aimed at social enterprises that are growing and scaling. Usually, in order to have got to that point, you've got to have a track record in place. Usually you've got a minimum viable product by that point, and you've got a track record of turnover. And here we are, I'll go back to that. And then in terms of that track record of turnover, it then helps you start to leverage other forms of money to be able to help you to grow, just like any other private business can get loan investment and equity investment, so angel investment, venture capitalist investment. Social investment is that form of cash. So you're at a point of growth and you're needing a significant cash injection to help you scale and grow, and that could be a loan that helps you. You've demonstrated a model, you're showing how you're going to transition and grow with the cash that gets invested in you, and so somebody takes a risk in giving you that money to create that step change. And like I say, loans are sometimes the option, or equity investment, a bit like a sort of Dragon's Den but in a more socially purposeful way. And those agencies that I was just mentioning here, Clearly So, for example, is an example of a social angel investment broker. Resonance is another version of that. There's a handful of these agencies around that can help you find people on a more equity investment basis, and there's other agencies like Social Investment Business, the Access Foundation, Unlimited, and others who can help you find a mixture of loan investment as well. So I'm jumping around here. Hope I'm still making sense. Like I said, I'm not going to go into huge detail on the funders and who you can go for. I've given you a smattering there, more aimed at local, regional, national and sectoral. If you log that in your mind, you can then research these guys at your leisure. I have flagged up here different ways to access funding. So there are portals, there are directories, there are ways of finding these things en masse. Most of them are usually free. But if you are an agency that's going to be looking at grant funding on a serious level and needing bid writers, and you're using grants as a way to in part sustain, which I would guide against, but some organisations, certain charities, certain types of organisations, hospices, people working with very vulnerable people, have to consider their fundraising strategies very seriously. They will often spend money to get to the most up-to-date and the most current information to work out what their best strategy is and who to access. Here you've got some options: Funding Central. I've not got the link there for NACVO, but Google them, they're there. There's government funding out there that you can be aware of, all sorts of lottery funding, Arts Council, and many others. I also highlight here, talked about Clearly So, who are actually an angel investment broker, but they put together a really good guide a few years ago that's still pretty current, called The Guide for the Ambitious Social Entrepreneur. I've put the link there, but you could Google that and you'll find that as a PDF quite easily. So I spoke a moment ago about social investment, and this was just, this applies to lots of things, this sort of tick checklist. There's some tools out there that can help you see whether or not you're ready for investment. And I would say a tool like this that was put together by UBS, you can go and have a look at this social investment toolkit. Even if you're not thinking about taking on loans or equity investment, going through this free toolkit is actually a really good tester for helping you look at some of the gaps in the way you operate. The toolkit will give you a steer, and will certainly ask you questions that you should be asking yourself as an entrepreneur, as somebody trying to develop a sustainable organisation. And it takes you through a series of sections looking at what's your level of social change, and do you understand that, and can you articulate it? How are you measuring your impact? What's the business model? What's your strategy for scaling? What's the financial model underpinning all of this? What's your legal structure? What can you deal with the kinds of financing terms that a social investment agent might want you to have to deal with? And how polished and ready are you to give an investment pitch? That will walk you through some of that stuff to help you think about how ready you are. And even if you aren't, it will brush up your thinking on becoming more savvy and becoming more eloquent in the way, more professional in the way you go about looking at this. And ultimately, whether it's social investment or whether it's grant funding, this stuff rings true. So, do you understand the social change that you're trying to make? What's your theory of change? And can you articulate it? Have you got a strong social purpose, and what is the social value you bring to society, and how do you measure that, and how do you know for sure that that's going to be delivered? Sustainability models, be they business models or sustainability models, and how you're looking to grow and scale in the future. Understanding your finances, your budgets, your cash flow projections, and how you're building a strong and realistic financial model. People are going to want to know. Understanding what your governance and legal structure model is, and checking that you are a bona fide not-for-profit organisation, social enterprise, and so we're eligible for certain funds or investment. But also, is it, are your governing documents robust enough? Who's on your board? Are they the right people? Where are the gaps? What additional help are you going to need if you seek to grow and scale? As I say, understanding the terms on which you're taking any form of investment on, and having a strong and credible way of articulating or pitching that, is all of those things are just as relevant for grant funders as they are for social investment agencies. And so I kind of combine the two together there. The better you are at all of this, the stronger you'll be at grant proposals and seeking grant funding, and likewise goes the same for looking for investment. Ultimately, in order to run a successful charity or social enterprise, in order to go for some of these grants, in order to go for investment, in order to build the trust and the credibility with the commissioners, I would say that these are your key critical success factors. The people involved, who's on board, your experience, your team's experience, understanding who your stakeholders are, So who's got a vested interest in seeing you succeed or fail, and what are your relationships like with them? Who are your customers, and what are they like, and why are they buying from you, and who else are they buying from, and who's benefiting? Is it your customers directly, or is it other people in communities that are in need of what you have to offer? The proposition has got to be clear. So, you know, what are you offering? What's the solution that you're offering to meet a need, and how is this credible and sustainable in the long term? Performance is around your sort of processes and how you're tracking, reporting and recording what you do, so that you can demonstrate that you're making a credible difference. You can demonstrate that you're financially viable. You can communicate with other people to be able to bring them on board as part of your team, or as part of your wider associates, or as part of partnership working. And overall, you know, this obviously culminates in a plan, you know, a working document. Having a clear working document, it doesn't have to be oodles of pages long, you know, but having a clear plan, what your objectives are. It can be a simple one-page theory of change for starters, but having a clear plan that makes sense, and importantly, having figures that make sense. What I often say to people is, don't start with the waffly writing. Don't start with the text, because you'll get carried away. Start with the figures, make sure that the numbers add up, make sure that your costs, the budget and the forecasting that you're doing, the scenario planning that you're doing adds up, and then do the creative writing bit, because otherwise, you know, people put off the figures because they worry about them, or they don't understand them, or they think, oh, I'm no good at maths, or whatever it might be. And you don't have to be a mathematician to write to write you know, a solid business case and to put good financial figures together. You have to be hungry to make a profit, make a surplus that you can then reinvest back in the community. And there are plenty of people, you know, through those lists that I gave, and through my networks, CAT's networks and others, who can help you put some of this stuff together if any of it sounds daunting. So yeah, that's really the next steps are really over to you. Use this as a tool, doodle out, you know, draw your boxes, doodle this out, and have a think about, what are you trading? Who are you trading with? What's your potential for commissioning? What might commissioners want to commission from you, or what you're already doing in that space? Have you looked at funding and fundraising? Do you need to? And if so, why? As I keep saying, it's good for research and development work. It's good for piloting new things, piloting new services, pump priming something before you've proven the market and the track record for things. It's good for training and development and capacity building. It's good for capital purchases to help create a step change in what you're doing so that you can be more sustainable, but they're not there for ongoing routes to sustainability, I would say. So yeah, have a play around, have a think and a look at that, and see if you've got a nice healthy cocktail for the way you're running what you're doing. Just before I close, I was just going to let you know that at Flourish we have created a series of podcasts. The next one that we're launching in a couple of weeks' time, so you know, by the time you're looking at this, certainly beginning of May, our podcast around income generation strategies will be out, so you can have a listen to that. It complements this workshop, and if you have a look on any platform and search for, and I say platform, you know, podcasting and sound and audio platform, Women in Social Enterprise podcast will come up. It will be episode 6 is the income generation strategy one, but you've got this little mini library forming here of various other themes that maybe have helped you. These are all free to access, and you see the lovely Cat there was involved in episode 4. And you can track us down on Twitter at FlourishCIC. My details are at the start of this presentation, and that's me done. So I will leave you to cogitate over all of that, and put my details up just finally. Let's see if I can torch it all again. Hope that's been of use to you. It's a whistle-stop tour, as I say. There's a lot in there, but go and grab yourself a real cocktail or mocktail if that's what you prefer, and get your thinking hat on, and I wish you all the best with the sustainability of your venture, and don't hesitate to get in touch if you're needing support. Thank you.